Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I'm going to keep talking about the adaptation of the card or board game Mini Rogue, which I have been working on. And if you've seen previous videos in this series, you'll know that this is the start screen where you choose whether you want a male or a female graphic to represent your character, and then that makes that affects which graphic shows in this column. It doesn't have any game effect; it's just a sort of cosmetic effect. Then you choose your difficulty, and you have a spread of cards. And the first card has a counter on it; has a little version of that same graphic. And as I program more, allowing you to move through the spread of cards and countering the different cards, this counter will also move to remind you where you're up to. And of course, had I chosen the female graphic, this counter would be a little miniature version of the female graphic. So I'm going to talk about how I set up that counter. In this video, I'm going to talk about the code for it, and I'm also going to talk about how I made the graphic from the original larger picture. So that's what it looks like. So let's get out of Chrome, and we'll start by talking about the code. But before I get into Twine, I want to get into this folder. This is the art folder of the game. So if we go back here, we can see that the actual program is here, and then we have some miscellaneous files here, which aren't part of the game. They're just sort of background information and notes. And then we have art originals, which is where all the files are, and then we have this is where all the files are in the form that they came from the internet, and then this art folder is where all the graphics are as used in the game. So if we go into the art folder, you can see that each of the cards that's used in the spread has sort of three versions. You can't see that very clearly, so I'll double click on these to bring them up in a larger form. A-T. Okay, so you can see we have A, which is the abandoned spaceship card. So that is A.png. Then we have AF, which is the same card but with the female counter on it. So obviously F stands for female. And then we have AM, which is the same card again, but it has the male graphic on it. And the same thing is true for all of the other cards. We have C, which is Commercial Planet, then CF and CM. We have H, HF, HM, and so on. Each of them has three variants. One is just the plain card. One is the card with a female graphic on it, a female counter on it. One is the card with the male counter on it. So let's now look in Twine. So bearing that in mind, bearing that those are the three pictures, and we're going to be loading one of those each time, let's look at the code. So you probably remember that you, as the player, choose which graphic you want and sort of which gender you want, and that is stored in $G. And $G has a value of either the character lowercase f or the character lowercase m, obviously standing for female or male. And of course, because I've got the same way of indicating female or male in $G as I have at the ends of the names of the pictures, that's going to make it easier to load the correct picture. So let's have a look at display, which is the screen where as the name would suggest, we show you all the cards, and you'll see that it is a HTML table with a series of includes. So basically, we set Z to some. We go through this, printing up this HTML table, and in particular, in each cell, we set Z to a particular value. Z is the it's a number that refers to the card, but it refers to the card's position, not to which card it is. In other words, because the cards are shuffled each time, Z equals 4 doesn't always mean card P or card Q. It just means whatever card is in position 4 in this particular spread. So we set Z to a particular value, and then we include card. So card is where most of the displaying takes place, basically. And most of card is to do with the hover text or mouse over text. But we've dealt with that in a previous video, in fact in the last video. So, sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble with my mouse. It seems to be a bit unresponsive. So we won't be dealing with, we will be sort of skipping past most of the text. So this what I'm scrolling through now is all to do with the hover text. So this is where it starts being relevant. We have a variable y, which is set to div title equals quote the hover text, which is quite complicated. Then an image command, and the image is square bracket img square bracket art slash and then plus sz. What sz is going to be is a single character. That's the actual, which card are we displaying here. So it could be P, Q, A, R, S, whichever one. So thus, at the end of this line, we'll have something like this, a sort of incomplete, an incomplete command, of course, because we've got this div without a slash div, and the image command isn't finished. Then we have this bit of code, which I skipped over in the last video. If C is equal to Z, then set Y equals Y plus G. So what is Z? Well, Z, we saw it in the last screen. Z is the which position card are we dealing with at the moment. So what is C? C, that isn't actually a very good explanation now that I look at it. I'll need to rewrite that. But C is which card is the character currently encountering. That's what I meant by current card, but it's not very clearly written, and I'll fix that before I upload it to itch.io. So if C is 3 and A is 2, for example, A is the area, so that would mean you were in area 2 and you were in the third card of area 2. You were in the card that was in position 3 of area 2. So C is sort of where are you in the area, I guess. So going back to here, so if $C equals $Z means if the card that the player is up to, the card where the counter is the same as the card we're dealing with, that's what if C is equal to Z basically means, then set Y equals Y plus $G. Now we know that $G is for gender, so if this were the case, as it will be at least once in the run, because the counter is always on one of the cards, then it would be add M if you're playing with male graphics, or F if you're playing with female graphics. So for example, we might end up with SM, and then we set Y equals Y plus this string here, which is .png n square bracket slash div. So we end up, and then we say print Y. So we'll end up printing something like this. div title equals all the hover text, and then call an image and call sm.png and then /div. So normally we won't have that M or that F, but in one case we will, where we're dealing with the card where the counter is. We'll call SM and where we would have otherwise called S or SF or whatever. And because SM is or SF is the same card but with the counter over it, well, it'll obviously display the card that has the counter on it, and that will let the player know that this is where you're up to, and the card that you're currently encountering is whatever it is, the abandoned spaceship, the commercial planet, etc., etc. So that's how the code works. And now I want to just very briefly look at how I made the actual picture. Now, I'm using Gimp. Gimp is a free, essentially clone of Photoshop, although it doesn't have all of the features of Photoshop. It doesn't have the AI stuff that Photoshop has recently added in. But it looks, I believe it looks and works very, very similarly to Photoshop. So if you happen to be using Photoshop, you should find this very easy to convert. I have to say I'm not completely sure about other art programs. I will say that I'm doing this on a Mac, and I have used Gimp on a Mac and on a PC, and they are, as far as I can tell, exactly the same. They don't seem to have any differences. So, with all that in mind, we started by getting the big male graphic and the big female graphic. Now, obviously what I did to make the male counter and the female counter are going to be basically the same, so I'm only going to go through one version of it. So let's get into Art Originals, and we have female PC, and we load that up. What I did then was I got the rectangle select tool, because I wanted a square. I wanted basically I wanted a square to start with, and then we turned it into a circle. And I got something like that. Then I went image, crop to selection. Now, obviously, when I really did this, there was a fair bit of back and forth, and I haven't got enough of the neck, or I've got too much, or but I'm going to sort of go through this as if I got it right every time, because seeing me do basically the same thing 2 or 3 times isn't going to teach you anything extra. But just bear in mind that, of course, this is a speeded up version that ignores the errors. Then I went image, canvas size, and what I'm doing here is I'm trying to make it into an exact square. So I tried to pick an area that was definitely wider than it was tall, because I wanted to squeeze in, given that the shape is sort of taller than it is wide, the shape of a picture of a human head is taller than it's wide, it's going to be easier to squeeze the sides without getting rid of anything essential, whereas if I squeeze the top and the bottom, I might end up cutting off too much of the head or the neck. So I wanted something that was wider than it was tall, and I got that. So we can see that the height is 678 and the width is 711. So we just change the width to be the same as the height, and then we choose center. And if that didn't look right, I might move it back and forth, but let's say we center it to that. And we choose resize. And because we've got these two different, like the boundary of the picture, or the boundary of sort of what we can see and the boundary of the image are different, I might go image crop to selection. That just makes it sort of look a bit neater for me, as in it doesn't make the final result look any different. It just makes the screen look a bit neater, and makes it a bit easier for me to work with. So we've got this square picture. We want to turn it into a circular picture for a counter, and also we want it to be much smaller. So now you could do those two things in either order, but I'm pretty sure I did it in this order, so I'll just do it in the same order, but bear in mind you could do it in either. So we go scale image, and I think I changed it to 75. And so once you enter 75 in there, it'll automatically scale the other dimension, because that's what this chain means. It means that the two numbers are going to be in the same proportion. So if you change one, it'll automatically change the other. If you were to click on here and break the chain, then that would cease to be the case, and you might want to do that for other purposes. But for this, we leave it as is. So we scale it to that. Now it appears on the screen sort of uselessly small. It's very difficult to work with. So we go on a Mac. This is one of the few differences. On a Mac, we go Command-Shift-J. On a PC, we would go Control-Shift-J. And that's generally true with Gimp. In fact, it's generally true with Macs and PCs. For whatever reason, Macs call their control button the command button, or vice versa. PCs call their command button the control button, but they seem to do exactly the same thing. So we have this picture. It looks sort of uselessly chunky, uselessly pixely, but actually when it's the size that it will be on the screen, it looks fine. And we can see that by pressing the minus key and sort of getting it down to roughly that size. We can see that, yeah, that looks about right. It doesn't strike us as far too blocky. So let's Control-Shift-J again. So we have this picture. Then we want an ellipse select. Oh boy, sorry, the mouse is going to be difficult here. There we go, ellipse select. And we go up into the very corner, and this is why I shrunk it before I did the circle, although you could do it either way. I think it's going to be slightly easier to work with. It's easier to get it exactly right when there's fewer pixels. So I go up into the left-hand corner, the top left-hand corner, and I drag this ellipse out until it's in the bottom right-hand corner. And you can see down here, when I point it with the mouse, it disappears. But when I've got this, hang on, I'll do it again. Sorry, I've accidentally clicked off it. Okay, you can see that down the bottom there, it says ellipse 75 by 75, or if I move it, it says, 39 by 76 or whatever it is. I want it to be 75 by 75 because I want it to be covering exactly the graphic. So I do that. Now I've selected the bit in the center. What I'm actually wanting to work with is the corners, because I want to cut off the corners and keep the center. So I go select and invert, and that doesn't look much different, but now I've chosen the corner bits, not the center bit. And I don't need to do this because this has this graphic has a oops, sorry, I want to do it. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong bit. So I look at the layers, and I check whether it has an alpha channel. And if it didn't have an alpha channel, I would add alpha channel. What an alpha channel is, and because I have added an alpha channel in the past, or because the graphic already had one, that option is grayed out. But let's remove it, and yeah, now I've got the option to add it. I can add it. An alpha channel means that you can have transparent and semi-transparent pixels, and we want transparent pixels because this corner, we want it to just be whatever. Remember that this counter is going to be in the center of a bigger card picture, and we want whatever's in these four regions to just be whatever's on the card. We don't want that to be different by virtue of this counter being here. So all we're going to do is just Command X or Control X, and that will cut them out. And then if we click off the selection, if we go Control A to select all, for example, you can see that we now have just the bit we want, just the circular counter. Now we want to add that white border, and that's fairly easy. We go Image, Canvas Size, we turn it from 75 to 85. So, and then we press Center. Now, the amount you increase it by, if you wanted a thinner or a thicker border, well, of course, you'd increase it by less or more, but you should always make the amount you increase it by an even number. And the reason for that is you want to add the same amount on all sides. You want the amount you're adding to the top to be the same as the amount to the bottom, and then the amount you're adding to the left to be the same as the amount you're adding to the right, because you want the picture to be in the center of the circle. And that's not strictly possible if it's if you change it by an odd number. So I always change it by an even number. In this case, I'm changing it by 10, and that will make the white border have a thickness of 5. But of course, if that doesn't look right to you, then you would change it by a different amount. So having chosen that, and you can see this time I had to do it in both windows because this chain is broken, meaning that it doesn't update one when you change the other. So we go resize, and now we have, and if I go control, because it's sort of zoomed in, I'll go Control Shift J, and you can see that it's in the picture is in the center of the canvas. So we want a new layer. And that new layer is going to be our white disk, and we want the new layer to initially be transparent, which it should be by default in this drop-down menu here. We press OK, and then in the layers we make sure that we're on the new layer, and we move it down because we want the white disk to be behind the picture of the PC, the player character, because if we didn't do that, then it would just be a big white disk and this would just be in the background. So we put that on the back. We choose Ellipse Select again. We do roughly the same thing we did before. We keep an eye on this, the dimensions, and it says ellipse 85 by 85, and it looks like I'm in the two corners. So we've now selected a bigger area. We get the paint can. We make sure we've got white here, so I might click in here to make sure that it's got a notation of FFFFFF, which means all the colours are turned up to maximum, which is how you get white, or sort of purest white. Press OK, I get the paint can, and I click anywhere in here. There we go. And now we have a white disc. That's how I did it with the female one, and of course you do the exact same thing with the male one, is just starting with a different graphic. So having done that, I did save a copy of the file, which is just the counter by itself, in case I wanted to do something with it later. But strictly speaking, we don't need to, because the counter itself is never printed. It's only the counter in the middle of the cards. But it's probably a good idea to save it just in case you need it. So we go Export As, and then we find the whatever file we wanted, and we might put counterf.png or something like that. Cancel that. So here's how we add it to the cards, and I'll only do it to one of the cards because it's the same procedure each time. I can't remember the size of these cards, so I'm just going to have a look. I'm going to have a look again. So, sorry, again, my mouse is being... Oh my goodness! You better not... Oh, I'm so angry at you. Okay, you're being temperamental. All right, we're looking at... Sorry about that. So, of course, if we were doing this for the first time, the F and the M one wouldn't be there, but we just have the plain one. So we look at this and we see that it's 150 by 205 pixels. Cool. And we get back into here and we change the canvas size to be 150 by 205 pixels. We don't want it in the top left-hand corner like that. We want it in the center. So we choose center. Because the height is 205, that's not going to be precisely in the center, but the human eye is not going to spot that. So whereas they might spot the difference between a 3 pixels on one side and 2 pixels on the other. So that's why we don't worry about odd numbers for this one. The numbers are sort of high enough that it's not really noticeable. we resize. Again, we might want to press minus minus to be able to see the whole thing, or Command Shift J. And then so now we've got the counter where it's going to be with the rest of the card, but we don't have the card. So we open as layers, and then we go into art, and let's start with A, I guess that's easiest. We start with A, we make sure A is behind both the disc, the white circle and the picture of the female PC. And there we have what it's going to look like, and then we just need to export as, in this case, AF, and that'll be in the art folder again. And we export as AF, which of course I'm not going to do this time because I've already done it. And what I did was I had the male and the female disc in the same file, and then I loaded all the cards at once, and that allowed me to do this more quickly because, for example, I could turn the female PC off and the male one on, and then I could immediately export this as AM rather than having to sort of load everything from scratch. And then I could turn this off and this on and this on. Then I could load another card. I could open as layers another card, and then I could do the whole thing again. So I did this with with sort of both the female and the male discs at the same time, just turning off and on different graphics as needed, using this eye graphic that's in the layers here. And then having done that, after a few minutes work, I had what we now have, which is plain male and female versions of all of the different cards. So that's how I did that. The next thing that I'm going to get onto is sort of playing the game proper, encountering the different cards. So that's what we'll be looking at in the videos to come. So I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.